Hello, Cinemaster lovers. Welcome back. I hope you're ready for an exciting experience because we've got something special for you today. Get comfortable, grab your snacks, and let's dive right into the action. Sit back, relax, and enjoy the show. Let's get started. The series begins with a scene of Mal Garrett yelling to someone asks him where his daughter is, and that the Garrett family is about to arrive, and he wants to reclaim his daughter because he has done everything required of him. At that moment, a girl named Carew appears, and Mal Garrett hugs her and starts asking her many questions, saying she looks much shorter. He knows from her that she is not his real daughter, and a massive monster appears and devours Mal Garrett. Afterwards, we see the monster disguised as Mal Garrett, and he tells Carew that they have many things to do. Then we see Helen calling out to Mallory, asking her to come help. The Garrett family plans to move to another place after Helen divorced. Before she leaves, she tells them to help their brother Jared, who they see as a very mischievous child who always causes problems. They think he has a big issue that they must help him solve. At that time, Jared stands in front of the mirror, drawing devil horns. Then a woman comes and says she saw Jared stealing gum from her. Jared tells her he didn't steal anything and shows his pockets, and his siblings defend him when they get into the car and leave. Jared takes out the gum box from his pocket and shows it to his brother Simon, who asks him why he stole it, even though he doesn't like chewing gum. Jared replies to Simon, saying he doesn't know. It just happened. After a while, the family arrives at a house called the Spiderwick. Helen tells them that they will enjoy this house a lot, as it's the house she grew up in, and it's filled with joy and adventure for her. She tells them that although the house is not tidy and looks old, once they clean it up, it will be much better, and they will love it, as it's full of surprises and secrets. The children start playing and getting used to the house. Mallory grabs her sword and swings it around. Jared explores the place where he and Simon will stay. Jared tells Simon that the scratches on the walls must have been made by their grandmother Lucinda, who had a habit of banishing evil spirits, and that there are strange creatures living with them. Jared tells Simon they will sleep in this room together, and Simon says the house is big and they don't need to share one room again, and each of them will have their own room. This makes Jared feel upset, thinking Simon doesn't love him. He goes outside to draw for a while, and then Helen went to him and asks him what's wrong. He tells her he feels like no one loves him, and that everyone prefers Simon over him. He tells her that he feels so neglected that Helen suggests taking him to a good doctor named Dr. Brewer, who was the doctor responsible for their grandmother Lucinda's case. When Helen starts to feel that Jared is upset about going to the doctor, she tells him that Lucinda was the closest person to her and the one she loved most in her life, and her only problem was that she believed in the fictional stories she used to tell, which is why she ended up in the hospital needing treatment. She tells him that if he has a problem with his thinking, it's not something he should hate himself for. Jared hugs her before she leaves, and Helen tells him to come for dinner. After dinner, when it's time to sleep, Jared hears a strange sound in the room and talks to Simon, asking if he hears what he's hearing. Simon is already asleep, and Jared has no choice but to get up and see where the sound is coming from himself. He goes into Mallory's room and takes her sword to defend himself. Jared enters the room and finds a drawing of a goblin with Arthur Spiderwick written on it. Meanwhile, Mal Garrett and Carew are sitting in the house next to the Spiderwick. Mal Garrett tells her he plans to devour all the people and that the world would be better without humans. When Jared's neighbor knocks, Carew tells Mal Garrett that dinner has arrived, but Mal Garrett says he won't eat his neighbor to avoid being discovered, but he will only eat her cat. The next day, Mallory wakes up and searches for her sword but can't find it. She discovers that Jared played with it, and when she finds it broken, she gets very upset, screaming and telling Jared that he always ruins everything and that she doesn't understand why he behaves that way with her. She also tells him that his actions are always annoying. Jared tells her he heard a strange sound last night and that the sword broke by accident without him meaning to. Simon looks at Jared and tells him to come. Let's go buy a mousetrap for the mice here. Helen tells him not to be late because he has an appointment with Dr. Brewer later. Simon and Jared go to buy a mousetrap and see Mal Garrett looking at them. They wonder why he's staring at them like that. On the way, Jared sees the same drawing he saw in the room on a tree. Jared thinks the house they are staying in is dangerous and that something is wrong, and they must be very careful not to get hurt. Later, Mallory meets her coach, who tells her she is not qualified to enter the competition and continue in the sport of fencing. Meanwhile, Jared goes with his mom to Dr. Brewer and meets Jane and Michael there, who appear weird to him. They tell him they have also seen many strange things in the city, which is why they are in the hospital now and receiving treatment. They ask him about his diagnosis, and he tells them he hasn't been diagnosed yet. Meanwhile, Helen visits Lucinda and finds her silent and not speaking at all. Helen tries to talk to her and remind her of some memories. Lucinda remains silent until she learns that Helen has divorced and moved to the Spiderwick. At that moment, Lucinda becomes very upset, scratches Helen's hand, and screams at the top of her voice, telling her to leave that house, that it is dangerous for her, and that she must leave quickly. Security comes and separates Lucinda from Helen quickly. Helen leaves, and when they return home, they hear a strange sound coming from behind the wall. When they go to see what's happening, they find many dead mice and an entrance to a strange place. Jared wants to see where this entrance leads, but Simon stops him. Jared insists on going up, and there he finds a strange place and sees a strange creature standing. After it writes on the mirror the phrase, "Look behind you," Jared gets scared and runs to Helen, telling her he saw strange creatures and that Lucinda was right. So Helen knows that Jared skipped the treatment session, and he was overhearing the conversation between her and Lucinda, and she took out the gum box from him and tell him that he really overdid it, and she won't stay silent any longer. At that time, Mal, Garrett, and Carew steal something strange that contains insects. Margot injured himself and transfers from his blood, telling Carew that this is how these insects feed. The next day, Jared goes to the doctor and is surprised to find that this doctor is Mal Garrett, who is disguised as Dr. Brewer. Mal Garrett sits and tells Jared to tell him what his problem is, asking about the strange creatures he sees and the goblin he saw. Jared asks how he knew it was a goblin, and Mal Garrett replies that Helen told him everything. Jared shows him a drawing of the goblin he saw, and then starts getting upset with Mal Garrett, telling him he doesn't even look like a doctor, provoking him further by saying he doesn't have an office or any qualities of a doctor. Mal Garrett responds by saying that if Jared wants to help himself, Mal Garrett can help him and make him a better person, and that he must be tired of always causing problems for people and annoying them. But their conversation is interrupted by Helen, who tells them that Lucinda has disappeared from the hospital and no one can find her. Lucinda prepared a magical recipe, allowed her to leave the hospital. Helen was very worried and started searching through her things at home. Mal Garrett tells them that evil creatures are everywhere, and that they should believe Jared more and try to support him. He grabs Carew's ear and whispers, then he leaves. At that moment, everyone hears something running from the upper floor, and they shout at him for not caring about Lucinda's disappearance and still causing them problems. They go to see what is this, and find a video of the Spiderwick playing. Jared tries to film it to have proof of what he's saying, but Mallory turns off the video, telling him to stop being silly. Jared tells her that what's happening isn't silly. As Arthur said, there are indeed strange creatures and that there was a book Arthur made about them. But the pages are missing, so she stops talking because she knew that there is something strange happens in this house. Helen then goes to search for Lucinda with Mal Garrett, telling people that Lucinda is not harmful at all, and everyone starts looking for her. Meanwhile, Jared is searching for new evidence, and it's clear that Simon has fallen in love with Helen. Jared tells him that he can't be so nice to everyone he meets, believing in Grandma Lucinda's words and thinking she's right and not crazy. Simon tells him that if he proves Lucinda isn't crazy, it means he's not crazy either. At that moment, Lucinda goes to a supermarket and asks someone for help, asking about a place called Demon Market. The person touches her and reveals that he knows her from a long time ago, and that he's not human at all, a strange creature who offers to help her. Then, Carew creates trouble for Jared to make them suspect him more, setting a small fire in Jared's papers on the bed while Jared is busy installing a surveillance system for the house to monitor what's happening. Suddenly, the alarm goes off. Jared runs to see the fire, puts it out, and then Mallory plays loud music and goes back to training. Suddenly, she faints and sees a theater in front of her. When she regains consciousness, she finds her hair tied to a tree and accuses Jared of doing it. Jared denies it, saying it must be the same strange creature that set the fire. Simon tells her there's no solution but to cut her hair, but Mallory refuses, saying she has a competition and her appearance must be good. Later, Simon finds that his mice have died and is upset about it. Jared tells him he suspects Mallory is behind it all and that everything happening is intentional, but Simon is too sad to listen and goes to bury his mice. Carew goes to him and tries to console him, asking if he suspects Jared of killing them. Simon says he's tired of Jared and all the problems he causes. At that time, Jared is trying to find evidence that he didn't start the fire. He goes online and finds a program to enhance the camera footage, calling everyone to see who started the fire. Jared is shocked when his image appears on the screen, confirming to everyone that Jared started the fire and also messed up Mallory's hair and killed Simon's mice. Jared insists he didn't do anything and is being falsely accused, but no one believes him. He retreats to his room and starts drawing alone. When he later approaches Simon, he tells him, "You never stop causing trouble. You should just admit your mistake for once." Jared replies that he did nothing wrong. Suddenly, he hears a new sound, jumps up, and tells Simon, "Didn't I tell you something was wrong?" Moving some books aside, they discover a hidden entrance. They open it, and Simon follows Jared. They find Grandma Lucinda inside, warning them to be very careful because Mal Jarrett can take on anyone's appearance. She also reveals that Arthur documented all the strange creatures in the book, but they had to hide it from Mal Jarrett, who wants to destroy the world. She tells Jared where he might find the book's pages and gives him instructions, and told him not to tell anyone about what she said because no one will believe them. Lucinda get out and Helen takes her to the hospital. Mal Garrett decided to deliver her, and she told him that she know from the beginning that he is the goblin. Mal Garrett made her get out the car in an abandoned place and asked her, "Where is the book?" And Lucinda told him that she didn't know. So Mal Garrett decides to kill her. Later, Lucinda dies in the hospital and a grand funeral is held for her. Helen confronts Jared about what he did, but Jared insists he did nothing and isn't responsible for the fire or Mallory's ruined hair. Lucinda had told him about a goblin named Mal Garrett who killed her and wants to destroy the entire city. Jared expects Simon to support his story, but Simon surprises him by telling Helen they were just joking. When Jared confronts Simon, Simon explains that Lucinda had instructed them not to tell anyone because no one would believe them. Jared argues that the situation is serious and that they will need help from someone older and shouldn't underestimate the matter, as the goblin could destroy the city as Lucinda warned. Grandma Baker then enters and tells Helen that the house they are living in is unfit for living. Helen disagrees, saying it's a suitable place for the kids to live. Baker insists that it's better to return to Richard and not stay in this house. Helen firmly refuses to go back to Richard. Mal Garrett enters, and Helen tells him she feels Baker is right and that they need to move. She considers living in Brooklyn, but Mal Garrett, seeing that it's not in his interest for them to move, offers to help and oversee Jared's condition. Later, Mallory sits with Helen and Baker and tells them her personal trainer does not want her to continue in the fencing competition. Baker sits with Helen and tells her that she thinks Tanya hates Mallory and doesn't like her. She tells her that she feels history is repeating itself and that she had to send Lucinda to the hospital because of the things she was witnessing, and she fears the same might happen with Jared. At that time, Jared is with Brewer's group, trying to integrate into the psychological support group and offering them cookies. When they see Brewer, they thank him for what he did and decide to have a session with him. Brewer tells him his behavior was very good and listens to his story, but Jared says he is afraid to share and not be believed. Mal Jared tries to encourage Jared to open up. Jared talks to him about what happened with Lucinda, and Mal Jared tells him to keep going. Of course, Jared doesn't realize he is sitting in front of Mal Garrett, thinking he is Dr. Brewer. Later, Mallory goes back to training and meets Valentina. Valentina tells her she is not qualified to train and that there is an upcoming championship soon, and this is because Valentina excluded her. After that, Mal Jared goes to Helen and gives her many documents and books because her task is to research the documents related to Lucinda and inform him of her findings. Then, Simon meets Carup and gradually becomes attached to her. Carup tells him she noticed Jared doesn't like her. At that time, Jared discovers a secret location Lucinda had told him about. Jane sees that they are standing with him to help him. While Helen is reviewing Lucinda's tapes, she finds that Lucinda was upset because Helen hadn't visited her recently. Afterward, Jared goes to the place where the papers Lucinda mentioned are located. They stand singing the song Lucinda Loved, opening the hiding spot. Jared reaches in and finds a page from the book Lucinda spoke about. He goes to the place mentioned in the map they found there, but doesn't find any strange creatures. At that moment, Jared and Simon argue but stop when they see a strange creature for the first time. Jared thanks Jane and Michael for accompanying him, and they agree to keep the secret among themselves. Jared then returns home, where Baker finds that he has a map from the ruins. She feels like history is repeating itself, so she takes the map, tears it up, and completely destroys it. She tells Helen that what is happening cannot happen again, and she won't do what Baker did, refusing to compromise on her children. She calls Jared, and during this time, his arm gets broken, and they take him to the hospital. Simon is surprised by Carup and asks her why she is there. She tells him Helen called her. Simon then tells her he saw her and knows she is also one of the strange creatures. He promises not to tell Jared about her. Later, Mal Jared meets Jared and asks him to tell him what happened. At that moment, Mal Jared has strong convulsions, and his appearance begins to change. This surprises Jared, who escapes before anything unnatural happens to him. He meets Calliope and tells her he needs to eat a human because his strength has weakened. He tries to find someone to eat, and then his neighbor comes along and he plans to eat her. Meanwhile, Jared is doing something when a person behind him reacts and talks about the plans and the creature Thumb. Calliope calls Simon, and Jared tells him not to trust her too much and that no one should get close to him so easily during this period. Later, Jared prepares Haley from Mal Jared and tells her the evil monster must be handled cautiously. Haley says he has spoken negatively about all the doctors he has visited and that no doctor is satisfied. At that moment, Jared tells her she will later confirm his words. Afterward, they sit encouraging Mallory and motivating her to continue fencing. Michael and Jane then arrive and inform Helen they will go out to continue their adventures. When they go out, they find the cage containing the mouse Thumb, but they discover the cage is empty. Jared puts on the lens Lucinda gave him, sees Thumb, and asks why he doesn't want to cooperate with them. Thumb replies that he sees Jared's family as ungrateful and doesn't like dealing with humans after Lucinda's death. Jared looks at Simon and tells him not to get too angry with Thumb, but Simon tries to convince Thumb. Thumb decides to help them for Lucinda's sake. Later, Bree, Mallory's friend, visits her at her house and plants something. Mallory is surprised by her visit because she doesn't have many friends. At that moment, Mallory tells Helen that Bree came to spend some time with her to motivate her for the competition. Mallory feels uneasy about the visit, sensing something is off. Mallory and Bree go into the room, and Mallory asks Bree about her problem with Valentina. At that moment, Bree tells her Valentina's story and says that contrary to what she thinks, Valentina sees Mallory as a talented person. Bree tells her to forget about all that and suggests they go to a party where she can introduce her to her friends. Meanwhile, the townspeople are holding demonstrations, demanding the construction of a hospital for the entire city and chanting against Pollard, even resorting to violence. When Helm arrives to defend him and wipe the blood from his face, she finds that people are upset about having sick individuals among them, believing the patients will bring corruption to the city. Jared goes to the party Mallory is attending because a page from the book they are looking for is there. They find Mallory there and are surprised to see her. However, Jared and Jane continue their journey, entering the secret room and finding a way to open the hiding spot where the second page of the book is concealed. Helen then arrives and tells them that something happened to maul Jared in his car and that he wasn't the one who caused it. Jane confesses that she was the one who did it because she was upset with him and wants to apologize now. Helen urges them to find him and apologize immediately. Meanwhile, Mallory is still at the party. Valentina introduces her to her boyfriend, Chris, and they play a game. Mallory is supposed to draw a card with the name of someone present, and they must enter a relationship together. Mallory draws a card and finds Chris's name on it. She then talks to Chris, telling him she knows he is in a relationship with Valentina and invites them to do something together. She tells him Valentina is a very skilled fencer. Chris responds by saying Valentina also said the same about Mallory. Mallory accuses him of lying, saying Valentina didn't say that, as she is not a skilled fencer and lacks the necessary talent. She asks him why Valentina hates her. She doesn't hate him, and she acts this way because her mother was killed in a strange accident and they didn't even find the body. At that time, Simon continues his exploration and suddenly finds Calliope in front of him. At that moment, he tells her that he knew from the beginning that she wasn't human and that she was the daughter of Maul Garrett. She tells him that she is not Maul Garrett's daughter and that she is here because the city was a forest and plants, and that humans overwhelmed and conquered them when they built large buildings, and she wishes they were friends, but clearly being human will prevent that. You are surprised that Michael comes and throws something at Calliope, hurting her, and tells him, "Didn't I tell you that humans don't like us?" And she leaves. Simon is affected because Calliope got hurt and tries to fix his position but doesn't know how. Michael tells him to come out with him to the top because he has something new he wants to show him, while Jane is with Jared and tells him there was no need to defend him and lie to Helen. Jane tells him she did it because she wants to help him, and then she goes to Maul Garrett's neighbor and eats things with magic to make her faint and be able to kill her. Then Thumb is with Simon and knows the language of the magic recipe paper is written in, and when Jared enters and finds Thumb sitting with Simon, he gets nervous and suspects he is submitting. Simon tells him that Thumb is giving him a recipe to return Lucinda again. They prepare the recipe, and it fails to bring Lucinda back, and Thumb escapes, and they don't know his whereabouts. Then he notices strange things happening in the place, and everyone gets tense. At the time Mallory discovers that Valentina had written on all the papers, Chris feels that Valentina is deliberately annoying her and doesn't go to ask Bree, and tells her that if she knew the truth, she wouldn't be ready for it now. After that, a strange incident happens in the city, and more than one person dies, and people see that Jared is the one who brought a spell or did something that led to these people's deaths. At that moment, Jane faints, and they want to take her to the hospital while Jared gets angry at Simon and hits him when they accuse him of madness. At that time, Simon goes out and tells Mallory that he hates Jared and no longer loves him, and that he is tired of his way and actions with them. The next day, Jared discovers that Simon is not there and has left the house, and he runs and tells Helen that they also fought with each other yesterday and that they hit each other. At that moment, Maul Garrett comes and knocks on Helen's door and tells her that he also can't find Calliope, and confirms that she is definitely in the same place as Jared. But Jared doesn't want Helen to believe Maul Garrett's words and thinks he is deceiving them for a reason he doesn't know. While Simon wants to return and tells Helen and his family that he has left, Calliope sits and convinces him that it's not necessary to return or tell them anything, and tells him he should go and visit his father and learn about him. Simon is surprised by Calliope's excessive interest in his visit to his father, and she tells him she does it because she wants to help him and because he is her friend. She succeeds in convincing him, and he boards the bus with her. At that time, Mallory goes and tells Jared that she suspects the fairies have kidnapped Simon, but Jared feels that Mallory is laughing at him, and it is impossible. Mallory tells him that this time she really came to help him, and she feels that Valentina is also doing something strange, and she started to believe Jared's words. Jared tries to contact one of his friends or his father, but his phone doesn't send messages. At that time, Helen tells him that she deactivated his phone because Mal Garrett suggested it to her. Jared asks Mallory about the manuscripts, and she tells him they are with Mal Garrett. And at that moment, Jared is surprised because these plans should never be in his hand. He goes out and tells Jared that he planned all of this to reach the manuscripts, and he knew from the beginning that he was the ghoul. Mal Garrett tells him he had no other solution than that, and this is the way to get him to the manuscripts and know the secret. He says there is one page left of these manuscripts, and Mal Garrett can destroy the city afterward. Then Jared screams and tells him he won't help him and won't give him the page, and threatens Mal Garrett that he will play on Helen, and he will stand with her, and he will make Helen the one who helps him in this mission. Then Simon sits with Calliope and asks her, "What kind of strange creature are you?" She tells him she can change her shape and disguise herself as anyone, and she can't always control her shape, and sometimes her shape changes. She says she was afraid to tell him that because he would be scared of her, and Simon reassures her that he is not worried about her, and his view of her hasn't changed after knowing her truth. At that time, Helen wants to travel and search for Simon, but Mal Garrett convinces her to stay and search through Simon's diaries. When Jared knows about that, he gets upset and tells her that Mal Garrett is a disguised monster and is trying to deceive her. He gives her the magic eye to see that Mal Garrett is a monster, but she sees Mal Garrett as an ordinary human. Jared is more surprised at how the lens isn't working and how Mal Garrett could stop its effect. Helen tells him to stop what he's doing and stop causing problems. Then he tells him he will help him find the page Mal Garrett is looking for, and says Mal Garrett wants to find this page to summon giant dragons that will devour all humanity. Jared goes to a strange place and finds this page and takes it. When he returns, Helen apologizes to him and tells him she was more emotional than necessary and wronged him when she read Simon's diaries and knew that Jared wasn't the reason Simon left. She tells him they are different from each other, and this is what makes them not know how to talk and communicate with each other. At the same time, Simon is with Calliope, who tells him she helps him and takes him to meet a strange person, who turns out to be a demon as well. This person tells her she is exploiting him and attacks, so Simon runs from him and hides in a place. When he extends his hand to the mirror, he sees Mallory, who doesn't understand what's happening. Simon tells her his article is strong and can overcome anything he faces. Mallory says she saw the fairies, and the fairies say she will be able to overcome the person outside. Simon thinks of himself as not strong and brave enough to do that, but Simon tries to do that. As soon as he comes out, Jared tells Calliope that he was deceived, and she told him she was trying to help him while she was trying to help herself and not him. At that moment, Simon sees Calliope turning into Jared's image and understands that Jared will die soon, and remembers the time of the fire that happened in the house, and writes that Calliope was behind this fire, and they wronged Jared when they suspected him, and he also tells her that he started to hate her afterward. Simon goes to Richard, his father, who is interested in acting and has left them, saying he needs him in his life. Meanwhile, Richard tells Simon he doesn't have time, and that parenting wasn't meant for him. At that moment, Simon feels like he hates his family and doesn't love them, wishing he had different parents. Later, Mallory stands and talks to Valentina, telling her she wished she could win her over just once and asks her to reveal the secret behind everything that's happening and why she hasn't earned even a single point. Valentina tells her she'll reveal the truth about what's happening, lights up the glove she's wearing, and reveals a fairy coin. Then Simon asks Calliope to help him so his brother doesn't die. Shortly after, Mal Jared tries to deceive Hello, and Simon says everyone he loves will leave him. Mal Jared attempts to prepare a magical potion for Jane to recover, but she remains as unwell as before. Simon tries to mend his relationship with Jared, who tells him that betrayal by the closest people to you is hard. They argue and part ways again, and Jared tells him to leave him alone, saying he knows what he's doing. Mallory continues her story with Valentina, who tells her she's a fairy and that Mallory is half human and half fairy. She reveals there's a magical sword, the only one capable of killing Mal Jared, and that it must be wielded by a pure-hearted human. Mallory wants to help Jared, but he can't trust her, saying, "Who told me Calliope isn't disguised as you?" He tells her she's never helped him before, so why should he trust her now? Eventually, he agrees to let Mallory help, saying he knows where the sword is because Lucinda told him its location before she died. Mal Garrett manipulates Helen, and Calliope notices, feeling upset about his actions. Calliope takes Simon and makes him reveal everything he knows about Mal Garrett to exploit him further. Meanwhile, Mallory questions her mother about whether she's a good person or not before deciding to help Jared. Jared plans to take them to a place called the Dwarves Market. Valentina meets someone named Joy, who offers to guide them to the market through a secret passage. He takes them on a tour to find the sword, warning them that time is limited and they must complete their mission quickly or be trapped in that world forever. They find themselves in court in the middle of the city's residence. Mallory declares the hospital won't be shut down, and Mal Garrett helps her and the townspeople. Simon calls Jared, asking where he is, but Jared refuses to give any information. Simon tries to convince Jared to help him, but he remains unconvinced. Joy offers to give them the sword, but not for free. Jared becomes frightened and insists they leave, but the others believe they can't leave without the sword. Joy demands their teeth in exchange for the sword, but Jared argues that the number of teeth Joy wants is more than they have. Joy proposes a game. If they win, they get the sword for free, but if they lose, they must give up even more teeth. Jared advises Mallory to change her moves at the last moment so Joy can't predict them. Mallory plays against Joy and manages to defeat him. They grab the sword and run, despite Joy's attempts to catch them. The children successfully escape the Dwarves Market. Later, Jared discovers the sword is just a hilt and suspects everyone around him of deceiving him. He accuses them of not wanting to help him and calls Simon a traitor, saying he'll never trust him again. He declares he can't trust anyone anymore and feels accused of being the villain among them, while the real villain is Mal Garrett. Jared gets into a confrontation with Michael, who tries to reason with him. Mallory takes the sword and goes to Valentina and Bree, but when they try to activate it, they discover it's a sword designed specifically for Bree. Mallory realizes she's not good enough to wield the sword. Lucinda's spirit appears to Jared, reassuring him that he's a good person and not on the wrong path. Jared wakes up to find Jane still unwell, with all his friends suffering from the sleeping sickness that has afflicted the town. Days repeat, and Mal Garrett continues to pursue Jared to obtain a dragon page. Jared escapes from the hospital, expressing his desire to leave. Helen tries to convince him it's for his own good. Jared later attends another session with Mal Garrett, questioning him about the dragon preparation page. Mal Garrett breathes fire, confirming Jared's suspicions about his evil nature. Mal Garrett tries to convince Jared he's a good person and has no intention of harming anyone, but Jared remains skeptical. Mal Garrett attempts to tell Jared his story, claiming humans have corrupted the world with their bad intentions, which is why he wants to get rid of them. Jared doesn't believe him and continues to oppose him. Jared encounters a butterfly that writes him a recipe to cure the sleeping sickness. He goes to inform Jane, who tells him that Mal Garrett keeps asking her about the dragon preparation page. She admits she denied knowing anything about it and warns that Mal Garrett won't let Jared live and will destroy him. Jared confronts Mal Garrett again about the dragon preparation page. Mal Garrett tries to bargain, promising to make Jared's family love him, but Jared insists his family already loves him. Mal Garrett attempts to manipulate Jared by bringing his friends and family to express their true feelings toward him. Michael refuses to talk to Jared unless he apologizes. Jared returns to talk to Jane, who reveals that everything is written and the characters Jared has seen are real. Mal Garrett disguised himself as these characters to deceive him, not more, and he makes him feel rejected. And then Mal Garrett tries to frame the story, convincing Jared that the villain in the story is his grandfather Arthur, and that Mal Garrett is the good person who wants everyone's best interest and aims to save the world. He claims that due to all the chaos, Jared sees the world incorrectly. Jared starts to become more disturbed and loses his sanity even more after Mal Garrett's words, imagining that all the characters in his life are actually Mal Garrett in disguise, and that he is the hero of the story. Simon enters and tries to talk to him, asking about the location of the paper, but Jared says he doesn't trust them, and that they are mere puppets in Mal Garrett's theater. Simon gives him the magical lens that allows him to see creatures, and he finds that Simon's appearance hasn't changed. Then Mal Garrett appears in front of him, transforming into all the characters in Jared's life, telling him that all these characters are reflections of himself and that he is the one assigning them these roles. He claims that everything happening is just Jared's imagination and not real. Jared transforms into a version of Arthur, and as Jared is lifted up, a page of the dragon falls off him. Afterward, Mal Garrett contacts Helen to ensure she arrives home before him. When she opens the fridge, she finds human remains, which convinces her that Mal Garrett is truly an evil person. When she confronts him, Mal Garrett tells her he has been waiting for her to arrive so they could talk. He reveals his plan to eliminate the world, and when she asks if they are part of his plan too, he assures her he would never harm her because he loves her and wants her to be his assistant in everything. Mal Garrett then prepares one of his magical recipes that causes all the city's inhabitants to fall into a sleeping sickness. Meanwhile, Jared is discharged from the hospital and insists they must continue the mission they started. Upon stepping outside, he finds that everyone has been infected and is suffering from the sleeping sickness. They play a loud song in the background to gather the rest of the team. Bree reassures Jared that they are not alone in this and that their allies are also present. They try to calm tensions between Jared and Simon, but Jared remains consumed by the idea that Simon is deceiving him and not genuinely helping. Jared refuses to cooperate with Simon, accusing him of being a traitor. However, Mallory convinces him that they have come too far and that Simon has the cure for the people and the sword they need to kill Mal Garrett. She asserts that everyone's efforts are crucial for the upcoming mission to succeed in defeating Mal Garrett. Reluctantly, Jared agrees to work with Simon, but under certain conditions. The children devise a plan together, and Simon explains that he was only trying to help because he foresaw Jared's death. Jared becomes upset with Simon, saying he should have been informed of such things earlier, and that they should have worked together from the start instead of separately. The children begin executing their plan, but Simon changes his mind and goes to Mal Garrett, betraying Jared and revealing the plan. Jared is furious over Simon's betrayal, but still tells Mal Garrett that he agrees to help him, so no one dies, and they can all live in a peaceful world. Jared writes something and gives it to Helen, who, upon seeing Jared tied up, quickly unties him and tells him she now believes he was right and wants to help him. They decide to use Lucinda's spell to disappear and devise a new plan. Helen struggles to fully recall the spell, as she has forgotten parts of it. Simon then approaches Calliope and tells her he wants to change the story's ending, ensuring his brother and no one else dies. After some persuasion, Calliope agrees to cooperate and gives him a cure for all the sick people, explaining that this is the only way to stop Simon's plan. Calliope seeks help from other strange creatures to restore peace to the world, while Helen recites the spell, causing her and Jared to vanish before Mal Garrett. They go to Lucinda, who reveals she has been with them the entire time, guiding and helping them by pointing out what they needed to do. She expresses her pride in them for everything they've done to save the world. Mallory tries to distract Mal Garrett while Bree attempts to kill him with the sword, but the blow has no effect. Bree realizes the attack failed because her intentions were not pure. She was solely driven by revenge for her father. Mallory then takes the sword, reassures Bree, and for the first time, the sword works for her. Mallory takes Bree and escapes. Bree re-engages in a duel with Mal Garrett and faces danger until Helen intervenes, saving Bree and spraying a magical liquid on Mal Garrett, weakening him and collapsing his power. Simon uses a magical spell to summon a powerful monster that devours Mal Garrett, finally eliminating him. However, the problem doesn't end there, as they suddenly discover another person impersonating Simon, leaving them unable to distinguish the real Simon. At that moment, Mallory strikes one of them with the sword, and the city's conflict escalates. The series ends with a mysterious scene showing Simon standing with Arthur, revealing that the chain of mysterious and thrilling events is far from over.